It was just another quiet evening at the gas station in Hollow Pines. Mira Rowan was behind the counter, tending to her usual tasks, when the roar of motorcycle engines broke the peace. The Shadow Reapers had arrived, a biker gang infamous for their violence and intimidation. At first, they seemed like any other group passing through, but their true colors surfaced when one of them started harassing an older customer. "Move it, old man," one biker growled, his tone dripping with menace. The older man, defiant despite his age, refused to back down. "Maybe you should learn some manners," he replied, his voice calm but firm. That was all it took. The gang erupted into taunts and threats, their aggression filling the small station like a storm. Mira couldn't stand by and watch. Stepping forward, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her, she said, "Leave him alone." The bikers turned their attention to her, their smirks widening. What they saw was a young woman they assumed would be easy to intimidate. What they didn't know was that her father, a quiet, unassuming truck driver, was more dangerous than they could imagine. This is the story of how one woman's courage and her father's hidden past collided to take on a ruthless gang. The small town of Hollow Pines woke to the soft hum of truck engines and the faint scent of pine drifting through the crisp morning air. Life in this quiet corner of the world moved at a slower pace, where people greeted each other by name, and the main street was lined with mom-and-pop shops that hadn't changed in decades. In the heart of it all was a modest gas station where Mira Ellison worked tirelessly to help her father, Elias Rowan, keep the family business running. Mira, with her chestnut hair tied back in a ponytail and a smudge of grease on her cheek, was no stranger to hard work. At 22, she was the backbone of the station, balancing the books, fixing pumps, and chatting with the regulars who stopped by. To anyone passing through, she might seem like just another small-town girl, but to those who knew her, Mira was as tough and determined as they came, a trait she'd inherited from her father. Elias was a towering figure, both physically and metaphorically. His broad shoulders and weathered face told the story of years spent on the road, hauling freight across the country. To Mira, he was her hero, a man who had always been there for her, even after her mother passed away when she was a child. What she didn't know, what few in Hollow Pines knew, was that Elias Rowan had a past he'd carefully tucked away, a past that had left its marks not just on his body, but on his soul. The day started like any other. Mira unlocked the station, greeted by the familiar chime of the doorbell. She wiped down the counters, stacked bags of chips near the register, and flipped the switch on the coffee machine. The first few customers trickled in, truckers grabbing a quick cup of coffee before hitting the road, and locals picking up their morning papers. As the sun climbed higher, the familiar rumble of motorcycles broke through the tranquility. Mira glanced out the window, her brow furrowing, as a group of bikers rolled into the parking lot. Their leather jackets gleamed under the sunlight, each emblazoned with the snarling wolf emblem of the Shadow Reapers, a notorious gang known for causing trouble in nearby towns. Mira felt a flicker of unease, but pushed it aside. "Stay calm," she muttered to herself, straightening her apron as the bikers dismounted their bikes. The leader, a wiry man with a scar running down his cheek, sauntered into the station, his boots clinking against the tiled floor. Behind him, 2 other gang members followed, their expressions a mix of amusement and menace. "Morning," Mira said evenly, her voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. The leader didn't respond immediately, his cold eyes scanning the station before landing on her. "Nice place you've got here," he drawled, his tone laced with mockery. Mira's jaw tightened. "Can I help you with something?" Before the man could reply, the doorbell chimed again, and an older man entered. It was Mr. Hiram Denny, a retired trucker who was a regular at the station. Hiram nodded at Mira, oblivious to the bikers, as he made his way to the coffee machine. The leader's gaze shifted to Hiram, a predatory grin spreading across his face. "Hey, old man," he called out. "You going to pay for my coffee too?" Hiram glanced over his shoulder, his face creasing in confusion. "Excuse me?" One of the bikers stepped forward, grabbing a cup and slamming it onto the counter. "He's asking if you're going to be a gentleman and buy our coffee, Grandpa." Mira felt her pulse quicken. "That's enough," she said firmly, stepping between Hiram and the bikers. The leader raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by her boldness. "Oh, look at this," he said, smirking at his crew. "We've got ourselves a little hero." The tension in the room was palpable, the air thick with the unspoken threat. Mira stood her ground, her eyes never leaving the leaders. "If you're not here to buy something, I suggest you leave." For a moment, it seemed like he might take a step back, but then he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You've got guts, girl. I'll give you that. But you might want to think twice before sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Mira didn't flinch, even as the leader's words hung heavy in the air. She had faced her share of difficult customers before, but this felt different. The bikers weren't just here to intimidate. They wanted to make a statement. "You heard her," a firm voice cut through the tension. Mira turned to see Hiram Denny standing taller now, despite the gray in his hair. He placed a firm hand on the counter. "She asked you to leave. Why don't you show some manners and do just that?" The bikers erupted into mocking laughter, their sneers filling the small station. One of them, a burly man with a shaved head, leaned closer to Hiram, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Manners? Is that what they teach you old-timers these days?" Before Mira could intervene, the doorbell chimed again, and this time it was Elias Rowan who stepped in. His towering presence seemed to fill the room, his gaze sharp as he took in the scene. He didn't speak right away, but the room seemed to shift with his arrival. "Elias," Hiram said, relief evident in his tone. The leader of the bikers, Draven Locke, turned slowly, his amused grin faltering as he sized up Elias. "And who's this? Another hero?" Elias met Draven's gaze, his expression unreadable. "I'm just here for my daughter," he said evenly, his voice calm but firm. Mira felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was short-lived. Draven's grin returned, more sinister this time. "Your daughter, huh?" He looked at Mira, then back at Elias. "I guess being a little rude runs in the family." Elias stepped forward, his boots clicking against the tiled floor. He stopped just a few feet from Draven, his eyes never wavering. "I suggest you and your friends move along," he said, his voice low but commanding. The room fell silent for a moment, the tension almost suffocating. Draven sneered. "We don't take orders. We give them." Elias's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he glanced at Mira. "Go outside, Mira." Mira hesitated, not wanting to leave her father alone with the bikers, but the look in his eyes told her this wasn't a request. Reluctantly, she stepped around the counter and moved toward the door, her heart pounding. As soon as the door closed behind her, she pulled out her phone and dialed the local sheriff's office. The bikers might not have been violent yet, but Mira wasn't about to take any chances. Inside, Elias stood his ground, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. "This is your last warning," he said, his voice calm but laced with steel. "Leave now, or you'll regret staying." Draven smirked, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone who looked like they'd spent more time behind a wheel than in a fight. "Come on, Draven," one of the bikers muttered. "This isn't worth it." Draven shot him a glare, but didn't respond. Instead, he took a step closer to Elias, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You think you're tough, don't you? But you don't know who you're messing with." Elias didn't blink. "Neither do you." The standoff was broken by the distant sound of sirens. Draven's eyes narrowed, and he glanced out the window. Mira stood there, her phone in hand, her expression defiant. "Let's go!" Draven barked, his voice sharp. The bikers hesitated for a moment before following his lead, their boots thudding against the floor as they walked out. Draven paused at the door, turning back to Elias. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and venomous. Elias didn't respond, his gaze steady as he watched them mount their bikes and roar out of the parking lot. Only when the sound of their engines faded did he let out a slow breath, his shoulders relaxing slightly. Mira hurried back inside, her eyes wide with concern. "Are you okay?" Elias nodded, his expression unreadable. "They're gone for now." Hiram placed a reassuring hand on Mira's shoulder. "You did good, kid. Calling the sheriff was smart." Mira glanced at her father, a knot of worry tightening in her chest. She could tell this wasn't the end of it. The look in Elias's eyes said as much. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint scent of pine. The tranquility of Hollow Pines had been shaken, and deep down, Mira knew things were about to get a lot more complicated. The next morning, Hollow Pines felt unusually tense. News of the incident at the gas station spread quickly through the tight-knit community. Regular customers stopped by, not only for gas or coffee, but to check on Mira and Elias. Despite the reassurances Mira gave them, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling lingering in her chest. Elias, on the other hand, was calm. Too calm. He moved through his tasks with his usual efficiency, but Mira noticed the way his eyes constantly flicked toward the door, the way his hand hovered near his waist as if expecting trouble. By midday, the tension broke. The low rumble of motorcycle engines echoed down the street, growing louder with each passing second. Mira felt her stomach drop as the same group of bikers rolled into the parking lot, their arrival as deliberate as a storm cloud. This time, they didn't come inside. Draven and his crew stayed outside, leaning against their bikes and laughing among themselves. It was clear they were waiting. For what? Mira didn't know. "Stay here," Elias said, his voice steady but firm. He stepped outside, his movements deliberate as he walked toward the group. Draven was the first to notice him, a sly grin spreading across his face. "Well, well, if it isn't the hero from yesterday," he called out, pushing off his bike. Elias stopped a few feet away, his posture relaxed, but his eyes locked on Draven. "You've made your point," he said evenly. "Now it's time to move on." Draven chuckled, glancing at his crew. "Move on? We just got comfortable." One of the bikers, Corbin Jett, a burly man with tattoos snaking up his neck, stepped forward. "What's the rush, old man? Don't you like having company?" "I'm not looking for trouble," Elias said, his tone calm but firm. "But if you're looking for it, you'll find more than you can handle." The laughter among the bikers died down, replaced by a tense silence. Draven's grin faltered for a moment before returning, sharper this time. "Is that a threat?" "It's advice," Elias replied. Before Draven could respond, the sound of a car door slamming drew their attention. Mira had stepped outside, her arms crossed, and her expression defiant. "Leave him alone," she said, her voice steady despite the fear knotting in her stomach. Draven turned to her, his grin widening. The little hero joins the fight. How touching. Elias took a step closer to Draven, his voice dropping. You leave her out of this. Draven's grin faded, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. You've got guts, old man, he said, his tone low, but guts only get you so far. The bikers mounted their bikes, the engines roaring to life as they pulled out of the parking lot. Draven called over his shoulder, We'll be seeing you. Elias watched them go, his jaw tight. Mira stepped closer to him, her voice soft. Dad, what are we going to do? Elias didn't answer right away, his eyes remaining on the empty street, his thoughts racing. Finally, he turned to Mira, his expression serious. We're going to be ready. The rest of the day passed in uneasy silence. Mira tried to focus on her tasks, but every sound, the hum of the coffee machine, the clang of the fuel pumps, seemed to echo too loudly in her ears. Elias busied himself in the garage, his movements deliberate as he rummaged through a locked storage chest. When curiosity got the better of her, Mira peeked into the garage to see what he was doing. Elias had a small duffel bag open on the workbench, its contents neatly arranged. Mira's breath hitched as she caught sight of a sleek black pistol and several magazines of ammunition. Dad, she said, stepping into the room. What is all this? Elias didn't look up, carefully inspecting the weapon in his hands. Just a precaution, he said evenly. A precaution? Mira's voice rose. This isn't normal, Dad. What's going on? Why do you even have that? Elias set the pistol down and turned to face her, his expression calm but serious. Mira, I told you we need to be ready. Those men aren't going to just walk away, and when they come back, we need to protect ourselves. Mira crossed her arms, her frustration bubbling over. I get that, but where did you even learn to do this? You're a truck driver, not... She stopped mid-sentence as realization dawned. Pieces of her father's past, that he'd kept hidden for years, began to fall into place. You're not just a truck driver, are you? Elias sighed, leaning against the workbench. Not always, he admitted. A long time ago, before you were born, I served in the military. Special operations. Mira's eyes widened. Special operations? Like combat missions? He nodded. I've done things I'm not proud of, Mira. Things I don't talk about. But those skills kept me alive then, and they're going to keep us safe now. Mira opened her mouth to respond, but was interrupted by the distant rumble of engines. Her stomach dropped as she realized the sound was coming closer. They're back, she whispered. Elias moved quickly, grabbing the pistol and tucking it into the waistband of his jeans. Stay inside, he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Mira hesitated, her heart pounding. What are you going to do? Whatever I have to, Elias said simply before stepping out of the garage. Outside, the Shadow Reapers had returned, their bikes lined up in a menacing row at the edge of the gas station lot. Draven dismounted first, his boots crunching against the gravel as he strode toward Elias. You don't learn, do you? Draven said, his voice dripping with mockery. Elias didn't respond immediately. He stood in the middle of the lot, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. You've had your fun, he said calmly. It's time to move on. Draven smirked, gesturing to his crew. You think you're in a position to tell us what to do? The bikers laughed, their voices echoing in the stillness of the late afternoon. Corbin Jett stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. I think the old man needs another lesson in respect. Draven raised a hand, silencing his crew. Not yet. Let's give him one last chance to back down. He turned back to Elias, his grin widening. What do you say, old man? Ready to apologize? Elias took a slow step forward, his gaze never leaving Draven. I don't apologize to bullies. The smirk on Draven's face faded, replaced by a glint of anger. Wrong answer. Before anyone could move, the faint wail of sirens cut through the air. The bikers turned toward the sound, their expressions darkening. Draven cursed under his breath. This isn't over, he snarled before signaling to his crew. The Shadow Reapers mounted their bikes and roared away, their engines fading into the distance. Elias stood still, watching them go. Mira stepped out of the garage, her face pale. They're not going to stop, are they? Elias shook his head. No, he said quietly. They're not. That evening, Mira sat in the kitchen, the weight of the day pressing heavily on her shoulders. Elias was outside, pacing along the perimeter of the gas station. Every so often, she heard the faint sound of his footsteps crunching on the gravel. She stared at the untouched dinner on the table, her appetite long gone. The air in the station felt thicker than usual, charged with a tension Mira couldn't shake. Every creak of the building, every faint rustle of the wind, made her jump. She had never seen her father like this before, so focused, so prepared for a fight that seemed inevitable. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the lot. Mira stood and peered through the window, her heart skipping a beat. It wasn't the bikers this time. It was a familiar face. Hiram Denny. Elias approached Hiram's truck as he climbed out, a shotgun resting in his hand. I figured you might need some help, Hiram said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. I appreciate it, Elias replied, glancing at the shotgun. But this isn't your fight. Hiram shook his head. If those guys come back, it'll be everyone's fight. I've seen enough bullies in my day to know they don't stop unless you make them. Mira stepped outside, her voice tinged with concern. Hiram, you don't have to do this. The older man smiled warmly at her. Someone's got to look out for you and your dad. Besides, I've got a feeling he knows what he's doing. Elias didn't respond to the compliment, but his expression softened ever so slightly. We need to be ready, he said, gesturing toward the station. Mira, grab the emergency lights. If they cut the power, we'll need to see what's going on. Mira nodded and hurried inside, her pulse quickening as she rummaged through the storage closet. Her thoughts raced. The idea of a confrontation with the Shadow Reapers felt surreal, like something out of a movie. But the look in her father's eyes told her this was very real and very dangerous. Outside, Elias and Hiram began setting up a defensive perimeter. Hiram positioned himself near the back of the station, keeping watch on the darkened alley that led to the lot. Elias stayed near the front, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. The minutes stretched into an hour, the silence broken only by the occasional chirp of crickets. Mira joined her father at the front, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. What's the plan if they come back? She asked softly. We handle it, Elias replied, his voice steady. Handle it how? Mira pressed. Dad, I need to know what's going on. I can't just stand here and wait. Elias looked at her, his expression unreadable. We're going to keep them from hurting anyone, he said finally. That's all you need to know. Before Mira could respond, the distant rumble of engines reached their ears. The sound grew louder, more distinct, as headlights appeared in the distance. They're here, Hiram called out from the back. Elias turned to Mira, his voice low but firm. Stay inside. Lock the doors. No, Mira said, her voice trembling but determined. I'm not leaving you. Elias's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Stay close then, and do exactly as I say. The Shadow Reapers rolled into the lot like a pack of wolves, their bikes forming a semicircle near the pumps. Draven dismounted first, his grin as sharp as a blade. You've got guts, old man, he called out, his voice carrying over the hum of engines. But guts only get you so far. Elias stepped forward, his posture calm but commanding. You've made your point. Now it's time to leave. Draven laughed, the sound harsh and grating. Leave? Oh, we're not going anywhere. In fact, we were thinking about sticking around for a while. Maybe make this our new hangout spot. The bikers chuckled, their voices echoing in the still night. Elias's gaze didn't waver. This isn't going to end the way you think it will. Draven's smirk faltered for a moment before he gestured to one of his crew. The biker dismounted, pulling a crowbar from his bike. Let's show him what happens when people don't play nice, Draven said coldly. Before the biker could take a step, Elias moved with a speed that seemed impossible for someone his size. He closed the distance and grabbed the crowbar mid-swing, twisting it out of the man's hand. The biker stumbled back, stunned, as Elias tossed the crowbar to the ground. Last warning, Elias said, his voice like steel. For a moment, the lot was silent, the bikers exchanging uncertain glances. Then Draven stepped forward, his expression dark. You've just made the biggest mistake of your life, he snarled. The Shadow Reapers regrouped, their laughter replaced with a simmering tension. The biker who had lost his crowbar stumbled back to his crew, nursing his wrist and casting a hateful glare at Elias. Draven Locke stood at the center of the pack, his piercing eyes locked on Elias, his smirk now a mask hiding his growing frustration. You're quick for an old man, Draven said, his voice cutting through the night. But you don't seem to understand who you're dealing with. Elias didn't flinch. I understand perfectly, he replied calmly. You're just another group of bullies who think the world owes them something. Draven's expression hardened, the grin slipping from his face. He turned to his crew and barked an order. Bring the truck. The bikers exchanged surprised glances before one of them nodded and walked over to a large black truck parked near the edge of the lot. The engine roared to life, its headlights piercing the darkness as it rolled toward the gas station. What are they doing? Mira whispered, her voice trembling as she stood behind Elias. Elias didn't answer immediately. His eyes narrowed as he watched the truck come to a stop near one of the fuel pumps. The driver, Corbin Jett, leaned out the window with a sneer. Here's the deal, Draven said, stepping closer to Elias. We're going to fill up, and you're going to pay for it. Consider it our fee for letting this place stay standing. Elias took a step forward, his voice steady. You're not putting a drop of gas in that truck. Now get out of here before this gets worse for you. Draven chuckled, his hand drifting to the chain hanging from his belt. I think we've been patient enough. He raised his voice, addressing his crew. Show them what happens when people don't play nice. At his command, several bikers dismounted their motorcycles, their movements deliberate as they spread out across the lot. One of them, a wiry man with a crow tattoo on his neck, pulled a switchblade from his pocket and flicked it open. Mira's breath caught in her throat, and she instinctively moved closer to Elias. Dad, we need to call the sheriff, she whispered urgently. We don't have time, Elias replied, his voice low but firm. He turned his head slightly toward her. Stay behind me. No matter what happens, don't get involved. The bikers advanced slowly, their footsteps crunching on the gravel. Hiram Denny, still stationed at the back of the station, stepped into view, his shotgun held at the ready. "I wouldn't take another step if I were you," he called out, his voice steady despite the tension. Draven turned toward Hiram, his smirk returning. "Oh, look at this. The cavalry's here. Tell me, old man, do you really think that pea shooter is going to scare us?" "It's not meant to scare you," Hiram replied evenly. "It's meant to stop you." The tension in the lot reached its breaking point as the bikers hesitated, their bravado wavering in the face of Hiram's unyielding stance. For a moment, it seemed as though the situation might de-escalate. Then Corbin Jett slammed his foot on the truck's accelerator, the tires screeching as the vehicle lurched forward. Elias moved in an instant, grabbing Mira's arm and pulling her out of the way, just as the truck barreled toward the fuel pump. The vehicle came to a screeching halt, its front bumper just inches from the metal column. "You idiots!" Elias shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You'll blow this place sky high if you're not careful." Draven laughed, his eyes gleaming with sadistic amusement. "Maybe that's the idea." Hiram tightened his grip on the shotgun, his finger hovering near the trigger. "You've got 5 seconds to back off, or this ends here," he warned. The bikers froze, their eyes darting between Hiram and Elias. Even Draven seemed to hesitate for a moment, the threat of an armed confrontation making him reconsider. "Fine," Draven said finally, raising his hands in mock surrender. "We'll go, but this isn't over." The bikers slowly retreated, their glares promising future trouble as they mounted their bikes and roared out of the lot. The black truck followed, its tail lights disappearing into the distance. As the sound of engines faded, Elias let out a slow breath. "Is everyone okay?" he asked, his eyes scanning the lot. Mira nodded, her heart still pounding. Hiram lowered the shotgun, his hands trembling slightly. "For now," he said. "But they'll be back. You know that, right?" Elias nodded grimly. "I know, and we'll be ready." The gas station was quiet again, but the tension lingered like a storm cloud. Mira sat at the small table in the back room, her hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee she had no intention of drinking. Elias stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the pale glow of the streetlight outside. "They're going to come back, aren't they?" Mira finally said, breaking the silence. Elias didn't turn around. "Yes," he replied simply. Mira felt her stomach turn. "Then why are we still here? Why not pack up and leave before things get worse?" Elias turned to face her, his expression calm but resolute. "Because running doesn't solve anything. If we leave, they'll just find someone else to bully, someone who might not be able to stand up to them." Mira opened her mouth to argue, but found herself at a loss for words. As much as she hated the idea of staying, she couldn't deny the truth in her father's words. A knock at the back door startled them both. Elias moved quickly, motioning for Mira to stay put as he approached the door. He opened it cautiously to find Hiram standing there, his shotgun slung over his shoulder and a determined look on his face. "I thought I told you this wasn't your fight," Elias said, though there was no malice in his tone. Hiram shrugged. "Maybe not, but it's my town. I'm not going to let those punks ruin it." Elias stepped aside to let him in. "I hope you know what you're getting yourself into." Hiram gave a wry smile. "I've been through worse." The hours dragged on, the three of them preparing for the inevitable. Elias showed Mira how to secure the doors and windows, while Hiram kept watch outside. They didn't know when the Shadow Reapers would return, but the air felt heavy with anticipation. Around midnight, the low rumble of engines shattered the fragile silence. Mira's heart leapt into her throat as she looked out the window. The Shadow Reapers were back, their motorcycles forming a menacing line at the edge of the lot. This time, they weren't alone. A second truck rolled in behind them, its cargo bed packed with supplies. Draven dismounted his bike, his movements deliberate as he surveyed the station. Elias stepped outside, his stance steady as he faced the group. Hiram followed, his shotgun at the ready. Mira hesitated for a moment before joining them, her heart pounding, but her resolve firm. "Well, well," Draven said, his voice carrying over the hum of the engines. "Looks like the whole family is here for the show." Elias didn't respond. He let the silence hang, forcing Draven to fill it. "We've been talking," Draven continued, gesturing to his crew. "And we've decided it's time to settle this. No more games, no more warnings." "What do you want?" Elias asked, his voice calm but firm. Draven's grin widened. "Your station, your truck, everything you've got. You hand it over, and maybe we'll let you and your little girl walk away." Mira bristled at the comment, but Elias placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You're not getting anything," Elias said. Draven's expression darkened. "Wrong answer." He snapped his fingers, and two bikers moved toward the truck, pulling out heavy chains and bats. Hiram raised the shotgun, his voice cutting through the tension. "That's far enough." The bikers hesitated, their eyes flicking between Hiram and Draven. Draven smirked. "You think that thing's going to stop us? Want to find out?" Hiram shot back, his finger steady on the trigger. Before Draven could respond, Elias stepped forward. "Enough," he said, his voice commanding. "You've made your point. Now it's my turn." Elias's movements were a blur as he disarmed one of the bikers, grabbing a bat and using it to knock the chains out of another's hands. The sudden show of force took the group by surprise, and for a moment, chaos erupted. Hiram fired a warning shot into the air, the sound reverberating through the lot. The bikers froze, their confidence shaken. "This ends now," Elias said, his voice cutting through the noise. "You leave, and you don't come back." Draven's face twisted with rage, but he didn't make a move. The bikers were outmatched, and he knew it. "This isn't over," he spat, retreating toward his bike. "You'll regret this." Elias stood his ground as the Shadow Reapers retreated, their threats hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. As the last of the engines faded into the distance, Mira turned to her father, her voice trembling. "What happens now?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He looked out at the empty road, his expression unreadable. "We prepare for whatever comes next." The hours after the bikers left were a blur of activity. Elias and Hiram worked tirelessly to fortify the station, moving heavy equipment to block vulnerable entrances and double-checking every window and door. Mira followed their lead, though her hands trembled as she carried supplies. "You don't have to stay out here," Elias said, glancing at her as he positioned a steel barrel near the back door. "Go inside and rest." "I'm not leaving you," Mira replied firmly, her voice steady, but her eyes betraying her fear. Elias sighed, wiping sweat from his brow. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out about my past." Mira hesitated, then placed a hand on his arm. "You don't have to explain right now. Just promise me you'll come out of this okay." Elias didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said more than words ever could. By dawn, the station was as fortified as it could be. Hiram brewed a pot of coffee, the strong aroma cutting through the tension. "We've done what we can," he said, handing Mira a cup. "Now we wait." The waiting was the worst part. Hours ticked by with no sign of the bikers, but the knowledge that they could return at any moment hung over them like a dark cloud. Elias checked his pistol repeatedly, his fingers tightening around the grip as he watched the road. Then, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, the sound they had been dreading echoed through the air. the deep, guttural roar of motorcycle engines. Mira froze, her coffee slipping from her hands and shattering on the floor. Elias was on his feet in an instant, his movements swift and calculated. "They're here," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Hiram, get to the back and cover the alley. Mira, stay close to me." Outside, the Shadow Reapers lined up, their bikes in a semicircle blocking the station from the main road. Draven stepped forward, his leather jacket glinting in the fading light. This time, he wasn't smiling. "You had your chance," he called out, his voice cold and menacing. "Now we do this my way." Elias stepped out onto the lot, Mira just behind him. Hiram appeared at the corner of the building, his shotgun trained on the group. "You're making a mistake," Elias said, his voice steady. "Walk away while you still can." Draven let out a laugh. "The only mistake here is yours. You should have just handed over the keys. Now we're going to take everything and make sure you never stand in our way again." He snapped his fingers, and the bikers sprang into action. Half of them dismounted, advancing toward the station with chains, bats, and crowbars in hand. The others revved their engines, creating a deafening roar meant to intimidate. Mira's heart raced as the first biker swung a chain at Elias. Her father moved with a precision she had never seen before, sidestepping the attack and disarming his opponent in one fluid motion. The chain clattered to the ground as Elias turned to face the next threat. Hiram fired a warning shot into the air, the blast momentarily freezing the bikers in their tracks. "Back off!" he shouted, his voice ringing with authority. But Draven wasn't deterred. He gestured for his crew to keep going, his eyes locked on Elias. "Take him down!" The lot erupted into chaos. Elias moved like a seasoned warrior, his years of training evident in every calculated step and strike. He dodged a swing from a crowbar, countering with a swift punch that sent the biker sprawling. Mira ducked behind a stack of barrels, her heart pounding as she watched her father fend off multiple attackers at once. She wanted to help, but knew she would only get in the way. From his position near the alley, Hiram kept the bikers at bay with well-placed warning shots, his aim steady despite the chaos. "Stay back!" he shouted, as two bikers tried to flank him. "I've got enough shells for all of you." Draven, meanwhile, circled the lot like a predator, his eyes never leaving Elias. He waited for the perfect moment to strike, his hand tightening around the heavy chain he carried. As Elias disarmed another biker, Draven made his move. He lunged forward, swinging the chain with all his strength. Elias barely had time to react, raising his arm to block the blow. The chain wrapped around his forearm, the force of the impact driving him back a step. Draven grinned triumphantly. "Not so tough now, are you?" Elias didn't answer. With a sharp tug, he yanked the chain from Draven's hands, his movements swift and precise. The leader of the Shadow Reapers stumbled, momentarily thrown off balance. Elias advanced, his voice low and steady. "You picked the wrong fight." Elias swung the chain in a wide arc, forcing Draven to step back. The leader of the Shadow Reapers spat on the ground, his smirk replaced with a snarl. "You think you're better than us, old man?" he taunted, his voice thick with venom. "I don't think," Elias replied coldly. "I know." Draven lunged again, his movements wild but determined. Elias sidestepped the attack with precision, using the chain to knock Draven's legs out from under him. The biker hit the ground hard, a grunt of pain escaping his lips. The rest of the gang hesitated, their confidence wavering as they watched their leader struggle. "Get him!" one of them shouted, but their movements were less certain now, their bravado cracking under the pressure. Mira peeked out from her hiding spot, her heart pounding as the scene unfolded. She saw Elias standing tall, his posture unyielding despite the chaos around him. But she also saw the other bikers regrouping, their numbers still overwhelming despite their hesitation. Hiram's voice cut through the noise. "Mira, get inside and call the sheriff again." Mira nodded, scrambling toward the station's back door. As she ran, a biker broke away from the group, his eyes locking onto her. He sprinted after her, his footsteps heavy on the gravel. "Mira!" Elias shouted, his voice filled with urgency. She reached the door just as the biker closed in. With trembling hands, she slammed it shut and locked it, her breath coming in short gasps. The biker pounded on the door, his shouts muffled by the thick wood. Inside, Mira grabbed the phone and dialed the sheriff's office, her fingers shaking so badly that she nearly dropped the receiver. The operator's calm voice on the other end helped steady her. "We're already on our way," the operator said. "Hold tight." Mira hung up, her hands still trembling as she pressed her back against the door. Outside, the fight continued to rage. Elias turned his attention back to the bikers, his focus razor sharp. Another attacker lunged at him, wielding a crowbar. Elias dodged the swing and countered with a swift kick to the man's knee, sending him collapsing to the ground. Draven, still on the ground, gritted his teeth as he pushed himself to his feet. His eyes burned with rage as he grabbed a discarded bat and charged at Elias again. This time, Elias met him head-on. The sound of striking metal echoed across the lot as their weapons collided. Draven swung wildly, but Elias's movements were calculated and efficient. He sidestepped each blow, waiting for an opening. When it came, he didn't hesitate. Elias twisted the bat out of Draven's hands and delivered a sharp blow to his ribs, forcing the biker to stumble back with a cry of pain. The other bikers froze, their confidence shattered as they watched their leader fall. Hiram, still holding the shotgun, took a step forward, his voice steady. "Anyone else want to try their luck?" For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, the bikers began retreating, their steps hesitant. Draven, clutching his side, his breathing ragged, glared at Elias, his voice hoarse with anger. "This isn't over," he spat. "You're going to regret this." Elias took a step closer, his expression unreadable. "The only thing I regret is letting you walk away. But if you ever come back here, you won't be so lucky." Draven's glare didn't waver, but he didn't argue. He gestured to his crew, and they mounted their bikes one by one. The roar of engines filled the air as the Shadow Reapers retreated, their taillights disappearing into the night. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Hiram lowered the shotgun, his shoulders sagging with relief. "I didn't think they'd actually leave," he admitted. Elias didn't respond immediately. His eyes stayed on the road long after the bikers were gone, as if expecting them to turn around. Finally, he let out a slow breath and turned to Hiram. "They're not gone for good," he said, "but we've bought ourselves some time." Inside the station, Mira watched through the window, her heart still racing. When Elias and Hiram stepped inside, she ran to her father, throwing her arms around him. "You're okay," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Elias held her tightly, his voice soft. "We're okay for now." Hiram leaned against the counter, his shotgun propped beside him. "You really know how to handle yourself, Rowan. Remind me never to get on your bad side." Elias chuckled, the sound low and tired. "You've been a good friend, Hiram. Couldn't have done it without you." Mira stepped back, looking up at her father with wide eyes. "What happens now? Do you think they'll come back?" Elias shook his head. "Not this time. The sheriff's got them locked up tight. And Draven won't have the pull to rebuild after this. Hiram nodded in agreement. That gang's finished. You made sure of that. For the first time in what felt like days, a sense of calm settled over the station. Mira let out a shaky laugh, wiping a tear from her cheek. I can't believe it's really over. It is, Elias said, his voice steady. And now we can finally get back to normal. In the days that followed, the story of Elias Rowan's stand against the Shadow Reapers spread through Hollow Pines. The small town rallied around him and Mira, their gratitude evident in every wave and kind word. Customers stopped by the gas station, not just for fuel, but to thank Elias for protecting their community. Mira began to see her father in a new light. The man she had always known as a quiet, hard-working truck driver was so much more than that. He was a protector, a leader, and above all, her hero. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mira and Elias sat on the porch of the gas station, watching the last of the day's customers drive away. Dad, Mira said, breaking the comfortable silence, why didn't you ever tell me about your past? Elias looked out at the horizon, his expression thoughtful. Because it's not who I am anymore. I left that life behind to give you a better one. But sometimes, the past has a way of catching up to us. Mira nodded, her heart swelling with pride. Well, I'm glad you were here. I don't know what I would have done without you. Elias smiled, the lines on his face softening. You're stronger than you think, Mira. You didn't need me to fight for you. You just needed someone to remind you how strong you already are. As the stars began to twinkle above, Mira leaned her head on her father's shoulder, a sense of peace settling over her. The storm had passed, and for the first time in days, Hollow Pines felt like home again. As the dust settles on this unforgettable night in Hollow Pines, we're reminded of the strength that lies in family and the courage it takes to stand up against injustice. Elias Rowan wasn't just protecting his daughter or his gas station. He was protecting the values that make a community strong: loyalty, resilience, and the unbreakable bond of love. In the heart of Hollow Pines, where the quiet hum of everyday life masks hidden depths of strength, the tale of Elias Rowan and his daughter Mira unfolds as a profound reminder that courage isn't born from the absence of fear, but from the fierce love that binds us. Elias, a seemingly ordinary truck driver, haunted by a shadowy military past, rises like a guardian from the ashes of forgotten battles to shield his daughter from the ruthless Shadow Reapers. This story isn't just about fists and firearms. It's a raw testament to the unbreakable bond of family, where a father's silent sacrifices echo louder than any roar of engines. Imagine the terror in Mira's eyes as bikers encircle their humble gas station. Yet she stands firm, her voice cutting through the chaos. A young woman discovering her own resilience, inherited from a man who buried his warrior spirit to build her a peaceful world. It's emotional to think how often we underestimate the heroes in our midst. Parents who carry invisible scars, friends like Hiram who step into the fray without hesitation, communities that rally when darkness threatens. This narrative teaches us that true power lies not in aggression, but in the quiet resolve to protect what matters most. In real life, we've all faced our own biker gangs, bullies at work, personal crises, or societal injustices that test our mettle. Elias's hidden past reminds us that our histories, no matter how painful, can become our greatest allies, forging us into beacons of hope for those we love. It's a call to embrace our inner strength, to stand tall when the world tries to knock us down, and to nurture the ties that make us unbreakable. What about you? Have you ever drawn on a hidden strength to protect someone dear, or faced down intimidation with unexpected courage? Share your stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear how this tale resonates with your own life experiences. If tales of heartfelt heroism and life lessons move you, hit that thumbs up, subscribe for more inspiring stories, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of empowerment. Together, let's celebrate the heroes within us all.